Hey YouTubers, good morning, it's Rob. Guys, today I want to talk about the Mediterranean and Japanese diet, something I've never heard anybody talk about before. What's going on is whenever I go to my doctor, he tells me something. It's like a ritual. It takes about 10 seconds. He says if I want to have a long life, I should exercise, eat the Mediterranean diet, and have good genes or good parents. And I guess insurance companies have told him that he needs to talk to his patients about exercise and diet, and that takes 10 seconds, so he's done. So over the years, I've looked into all sorts of diets, and I try to incorporate into my diet things I find in other diets that look like something I can do that would be helpful and that I'd enjoy. You can go online and find all sorts of information about the Mediterranean diet, but hardly anything about the Japanese diet as something to uh, try out. Um, this is actually a pretty good chart for the Mediterranean diet. If you've never seen it before, I'm going to leave a link to it. However, what about the Japanese diet and why am I interested? At the end of the video, I want to show you something completely unexpected that I hadn't expected to come across, and uh, it's about the Japanese diet, but in a way, it's about all diets that I haven't heard anybody talk about. This is a article from the Institute of Cardiology in Montreal, and the title is "Why Do the Japanese Have the Highest Life Expectancy in the World?" That got my interest because if I'm supposed to be doing the Mediterranean diet to increase my lifespan, why not have the diet of the people who live the longest? And sure enough, the Japanese do have a very long life, the highest among the G7, which are the like seven top um, technologically advanced countries in the world. The overview is that the Japanese have the highest life expectancy at birth, and they think this is mainly due to fewer deaths from heart disease and stroke and cancer, specifically breast and prostate cancer. They say the exceptional longevity is explained by a low rate of obesity. Number one, a unique diet and a unique diet characterized by low consumption of red meat and a high consumption of fish and plant foods such as soybeans and tea. Since I found out about this, I've been incorporating a lot of tofu and green tea into my diet, and I love fish, so it's been a no-brainer. It's been a very simple way for me to it's been a very simple way to add something that's beneficial to my diet. Interestingly enough, the life expectancy for the Japanese, this is back in 2016, was 81 years and 87 for women. I think for men in the U.S., it's gone down because of COVID and because of opioids, fentanyl coming in from China and Mexico. I think you've got 100,000 people a year dying from that. But anyway, it's 73 is the life expectancy at birth, I think, as of this year or last year. The high expectancy, once again, is attributed to basically um, the high consumption of fish and plant foods such as soybean and tea. They have very low amounts of obesity and very low consumption of red meat. Now, but here's where it gets interesting. Actually, it gets more interesting in two parts. This is the first part. In the 1960s, early, Japan actually had rather low life expectancy, but they were able to change their diet and get rid of a lot of salty and pickled foods. And when they did this, they reduced their stroke and stomach cancer dramatically. So this is fascinating. So often you read and hear of studies done by this amount of people, it's 10,000, 5,000, 300. This was the entire country. It changed. And it seems to have been from the primarily the lot of salt and pickled foods. And they were able to increase their life expectancy by changing their diet as a nation. The article has done a wonderful job of adding the different things that people eat in the diet and breaking it down by Canada, France, Italy, USA, and Japan. And it's pretty noticeable um, that they're eating a lot of some things and less of other compared to here us in the USA. Like for tea, they drink about uh, double the amount of tea. But for soybeans, they have about 700 times more soybeans. But in other things, like pork, surprisingly, they come close to what we have in pork, but they have a lot less sweets and starches and potatoes and fruits. Now, I eat a lot of fruits, so I was surprised at this. Um, but mostly less red meat and more fish and seafood and soybeans in the green tea. Now, the diet in Japan has been changing to more and more westernized. The authors of the article said there was like three groups: the people who eat traditional plant foods and fish, then you have the bread and dairy group, and the animal food and oils. And it's pretty fascinating. There's been a study of large groups of people who left Japan and went to Hawaii and California. And after they migrated to Hawaii and California, their mortality decreased. Their incidences of heart disease and stroke quadruple. Uh, those in California, it went up 4 times and doubled to those who went to Hawaii. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. It said, what is surprising is that this increase has been observed regardless of blood pressure or cholesterol levels and seems rather directly related to the abandonment of the traditional Japanese way of life by migrants. Not just diet, but the way they live. So that is something nobody ever talks about. People talk about drugs and diet and exercise, but their actual way of life, their culture, um, it's never brought up in any conversations. So to repeat, we had a group of people in Japan leave Japan. In Japan, they had a certain amount of illness per 10,000, per 100,000, so on, in heart disease and cancer. When they went to California and Hawaii, the heart disease and stroke doubled to those who went to Hawaii and quadrupled, went up 4 times in California. And initially, they attributed this to the change in the diet, but as time went by, they were seeing results. Um, it looked like it had more to do with a totality of not just the diet, but also their culture, their way of life. When they had started adopting the way of life of the people here in the U.S., they began having problems. There's a study they linked to. I tried to read it. This is the study, but I have as a behind a paywall. It costs like 36 bucks. It shows the prevalence of disease and other factors in men living in Japan, Hawaii, and California. And I wanted to see where they would talk about the culture and way of life. Um, but it this is just the preface of the study, so I couldn't get into the main study. At the bottom, it mentions that the three geographic locations were compared to heart disease at levels of blood pressure and cholesterol. And at each blood pressure level and at each cholesterol level, the greater prevalence of heart disease in California persisted. These facts, plus the universality of smoking in Japan, suggest that conventional risk factors only partially explain the observed gradient in heart disease. What that means, the gradient, they saw a certain level in Japan, a higher level in Hawaii, and an even higher in California. So there's something going on. It's not just diet. Now we see that the diet did make a factor in early when they changed over from the salty and pickled food. They saw a big increase. But there's things going on that I know people recommend the the Mediterranean diet, and I know that they recommend the Japanese diet, which are food and things you can incorporate in your diet. But it looks like your actual culture and your way of life has something to do with your end results. And the more I think about it, all of the places on the planet where people live for a very long time, each one of them have a specific diet, and a lot of them are similar to each other. They're usually whole foods, plant foods, not a lot of processed and so on. So we tend to think those are the things that are driving the health factors. And but usually in these same places where they're living for a long time, they're living in a place where there's a sense of community and a sense of place, a sense of belonging, and they have a history and a culture that they share. And it's sort of like an analogy of when people tell you to take a vitamin pill and it's derived from some food and you're expected to get the same results as if you took that food. Well, there's so many other factors going on in the food that we don't even know about. And the raw vitamin itself, separated from all the other things in the food, doesn't often give us the results we want that we could get from eating the food. And I think the same thing is going on with places that have people that live for a long time. They also have things other than the food and the diet. They have a culture, they have a sense of belonging, uh, they have a support system, they have uh, a sense of self that in a modern globalized society where everybody's atomized and separate and we just become consumer we just become little robots, numbers on a page. We don't mean anything anymore, and just. Um, but how do you quantify that? How do you study that? How do you prove this in a study? It's a lot easier just to look at vitamins and minerals and dots on a graph. How do you study if someone's been in a place for 5,000 years? There's a sense of place and belonging that you can't reproduce like you can just adopting somebody's diet. So I don't have any conclusions in this video. I'm going to continue to take fish and the tofu and the tea because it agrees with me and it's very simple to do. And also with the Mediterranean diet, they recommend you don't eat some things, but they also recommend you exercise um, and have uh, other things going on in your life than just focusing on diet. But I think it's complicated. I don't think it's that simple where you just eat certain things and drink certain things and everything's going to be fine. I think it's a lot more complicated. But it is pretty much, it seems to be common sense that there are certain foods that do seem to be negative for certain groups, for certain cultures, certain people when they eat certain things. As we saw with the Japanese eating the very salty, very pickled foods for long periods of time. For instance, the Japanese eat a lot of rice, a ton of rice, compared to the U.S., but the U.S. has some awful rice with arsenic in it that if you were to start copying the Japanese diet and eating the rice grown here to the extent that they eat in Japan, I don't think it would be healthy for you to have the same amount of rice unless you had the rice that did not have arsenic in it. So it's complicated, but it's fascinating at the same time, and I'm always trying to learn more. And I had no idea that people from Japan, when they went to the U.S., that they got worse results, not only on the Western diet, but I think even when they had the regular diet, if they started adopting Western ways, they started seeing poor health. So that's pretty fascinating. I'm going to finish with I remember reading a study years ago, and I can't find it, and it was about some people in Pennsylvania. It was a very large study, a Rosemont study, Rose something. The word Rose was in it. And they could not understand why the people were so healthy because their diet was poor, like many people in the state, but they had excellent health with much lower heart and stroke than other people. And the only thing they could think of is everyone in the town or the region, they all had relatives and friends that lived near them that they knew for generations, and you had a large support group. Their grandfather lived 2 blocks away, and their aunt and uncles lived 6 blocks away, and everybody knew everybody, and there was a strong sense of place, community, and culture, and they had very low heart disease and stroke, even though they didn't have a lot of exercise and they didn't have that good of a diet. So it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, guys, I didn't solve anything today, did I? I didn't. I think I raised more questions than I answered, but I think it's something worth talking about and thinking about. Hope you enjoyed this video. Put out new stuff every week. Been doing it for 16 years. Got over 1,200 videos. Got a bunch of cool people I feature on my channel down at the bottom. Here we go. No relation to me. They would not anyway. And a bunch of cool playlists on different subjects because this is a variety channel. You never know what you're going to find. I never know what I'm going to have. All right, guys. Take care. See you out there.